Welcome to 7 Minutes of Human. I'm your girl, Shantae J. This is just an opportunity to just talk about whatever comes to mind. And currently what's on my mind is the topic of grief. This is something that I don't take lightly. And I admittedly have been kind of putting to the side or pushing to the side when thinking about it. Let's say grief, right? When you hear that word, what comes to mind for you? For me, it's wrapped around in layers, like is love what it is. And the first layer I always think about is that layer of my mother, Marlene Edwards, and losing her in the physical realm, December 7th, 2013, and how I managed to process through it to get to this point. What does that look like? I can't even tell you, because here's the thing. Grief shows up differently for every single body. And it wasn't until recently where a friend of mine had made an Instagram post, and her post was essentially permission for people to acknowledge the grief that she's going through. And I was so inspired by that post because I started thinking like, yo, you know how when folks are asking, how can I help? How can I show up? And it made me think about how I had been pushing grief and compartmentalizing it to suit other people. And what that did and has done. When I think about grief, I think about it in different layers, right? And thinking about a person or people, and then there's grief, so that's relationships, right? Romantic, platonic, and thinking about it from the standpoint of career, jobs, and thinking about you, me, myself. Grieving who I used to be back in the day, accurate days, and how often I would push it away to not feel for the safety of others. Now, we're going to get into something else, another topic about what that looks like and not prioritizing yourself, #mask on verse. But for the purposes of this part in grief and what that looks like and what it has been, it wasn't until I moved back home July 25th, 2020. Home is in Chicago. Hadn't lived here for 17 years, and that December was the first time I had to lean in, or I chose to lean into the grief, because it was the first year since my mother's transition that I was home, and she wasn't here. And living home, let's be clear, because I've been home and come home and visit home, but I would live other places, DC, New York, and I would go back to those homes. But this, living here. And the way in which I cried because I was present with the grief and the emotions and the sadness and the loneliness and the void. And I remember my spiritual advisor last year actually saying to me, if your mother was here in the physical realm, would she do everything she did all over again? And I was like, yeah. That's your answer. And I share that little tidbit because I knew my attachment to grief for my mother had been this, I wish I coulda, shoulda, woulda been, but then that was also going against my whole idea around faith in the universe and understanding my belief system. If everything happens as it should. Now, I'm not telling you to subscribe to that. I'm just offering and inviting, when you think about grief, how have you been handling it? The death and rebirth of things, right? Because things are no longer what they used to be, and honoring and honestly thinking about how collectively we've gone through this impact of the global pandemic and how it's still existing and what it has done for us. And for me, it's been so many layers of me, and I've hidden it because I felt like, I don't want to be sad around people. But actually, you know what? Sadness is healing. Also celebrating too. Grief in its own way, in being present for me and what it is like, human. It's a part of being human. And I don't know, to get to this, from the surface to the depths, like, is levels to this and how we choose to move forward. And what I've been doing more recently is leaning into it. Leaning into who I used to be, where I used to be. The difference now is not being attached to it. Honoring the past to support where I am now and celebrating it. And it's hard sometimes because also the body be remembering, because even talking about, July 25th date, today's date, July 24th, there's grief around that. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, me moving here or moving back, and what it took for that to be. And so I guess my piece around this grief is the opportunity to explore it and get curious, and when it comes to feelings, when it comes to emotions, to allow them to be. Because grief ain't gonna run, B. Even if you put it away, you gotta go find it. It's gonna find you. So the way that you choose to deal, the way that you choose to manage is oftentimes connected to you. And it's okay, because you're human. And it's okay to be sad. Joy does come in the morning. That's my 7 minutes. I love you.